On the other hand, I've been in the technology industry for a long time, for over 20 years. So I have some old hardware, things like complex software, like running MATLAB or doing AutoCAD. It runs superbly fast. So that tells you if your software is good, even if your hardware may be crappy, you can do a lot better. Okay? So, what happens when you're just focused on hardware and not working on your software? Things like Michael Phelps happens. Amazing piece of hardware, but the software is corrupted. And maybe you will say that that is an outlier. But that is my point, is that the outliers make the biggest impact in the world. So Michael Phelps is a specimen. Who's the other guy who races bike?
Lance Armstrong.
Lance Armstrong is another example. They are pieces of hardware that is hard to come across. They're amazing. They're perfection. They're human perfection. If Annamaya Kosha, or the physical body, was what we were concerned about. They are. They're absolutely. My wife and I used to teach yoga to the Seahawks in Seattle. And so when those guys come, they are specimens. Like, you put them in an anatomy class and you will memorize all muscles of the body, just like that. You can see everything. Yes? So they're a specimen. But look at their software, absolutely corrupted, absolutely buggy. So they will not go very far. Does that make sense? They will not last. Their willpower will fail. And it always does. And I bring up these names, no disrespect, because they have paid their dues. They have worked very hard to get to where they are. But at the end of the day, hardware will come to a stall. If nothing else, just age will catch up to you. Okay? So, in order to overcome that, Indian system or Indian philosophical system or Tantric philosophical system divides life into 4 different segments. The first quarter of the life is meant for academic pursuit. The second quarter of life is made for raising family. The third quarter of life is meant for working on your software. That is devotion. Do yoga. And the last is to leave everything behind. Practice leaving everything behind. That's when people go to the forest, to the caves, and practice and meditate. So that is the recipe of life. Those are the 4 quarters that you divide your life. What does that mean? That if you analyze it in modern language, they're focusing more on the software than perhaps on the hardware. Okay? So spirituality is all about software. Devotion is all about software. I don't care what you are devoted to. It doesn't matter. It's a material. But when you say yoga is all about doing asana practices, it will eventually come to a complete halt. Because either because of corruption or because of age, you are eventually going to hit a wall and things will stop for you. And that is the complete wrong angle to look at yoga. Okay? So let's come to the topic that we're talking. So you learned a little bit more about yoga. So let's come to the topic that we're talking about. So I'm still on point number 3. And that is, when you're studying, when you are collecting sample size and you're doing your studies, what exactly it is that you're focusing on. So I'll give you a few examples and maybe you can come up with a few more. So one thing can be that if you're doing a lot of asana practices, does your diet change? A curious topic. Another topic can be that if you're practicing a lot of pranayama, does that have chemical changes in your body? Okay? So some of the lesser practice, pranayamas, bandhas, etc., what does that do to your body? What does that chemistry look like? There can be many other topics. Do you guys have any curiosity, or you have read a topic that is exciting and interesting and you're like, wow, that is a great study. Even though statistically completely wrong, it's a great topic. I'm kidding. Anything that you have read?
There's something about the effects of meditation in the brain, what happens in the
Brain waves, yes. Yeah. Meditation, chanting against beta and theta waves in your mind, what that creates. There are lots of studies that are going on. The problem with all of these studies is simply one thing and one thing only, is that yoga is so much dependent on the individual and what is happening inside of the individual that it would be very difficult to generalize that. Makes sense? So in this case, the law of average will not produce a result that is worth holding on to. Why? Because my experience is here, your experience is here, your experience is here, his experience is there, her experience is there. If you take all of those points, it will fall at a point that might be external to all of those points. It is too subjective. There are too many parameters at play that if you were to do a holistic study, that would require a massive population. Like, how big of a population do you think it's going to take? 10,000? More? 100,000? More? 1 million?
Probably everyone who's doing yoga in the world.
Okay, fine idea. Let's find everyone who is doing yoga in the world. Okay? Today. Yes? So we start collecting results now, today. What would that entail? What number would that look like? So there are roughly 6 points, let's say for mathematical simplicity, there are 6 billion people. Okay? So I'm going to give a very generous estimation and say, let's say half of the people do yoga. Significantly enough that people have a decent result or impactful result. You guys are good with that number? Okay. Serious amounts of yoga has been practiced in the subcontinent of India, and by that I mean not the country of India, but the entire subcontinent that consists of Nepal, Bhutan, Tibet, parts of China, parts of what is modern Pakistan and Afghanistan, and India for about, let's say, 1,000 years. Okay? India has 1.2 billion people right now, today. So take 1,000 years, the population was not so much, so it will be a curve, yeah, going down as you go back in time, or it will be a slant as you go up forward in time. So if it is 1.2 billion today, do you think over the course of 1,000 years we can sum them up and say there could be 3 billion people? Yes? Okay, it will be more than 3 billion people, right? And they have already been doing yoga, and they have been perfecting yoga in that laboratory. They have been perfecting yoga in that laboratory. They have practiced everything there is to practice. They have come up with all different ways you can breathe. Anuloma, Viloma, Pratiloma, Bhastrika, Nadi Shodhana, you name it. They have practiced them all. Not only they have done that, they have refined the ratio and how you put together, what falls works before if it's done earlier versus later versus all that thing. They have studied it to the absolute precision. I'll give you a few examples. How many emotions do you think a human being can possibly have? They have figured that out. There are 9 emotions. Human beings can try. For a million years, they will not be able to come up with the 10th emotion. It's called rasas. And so they have studied that, and they have perfected that. There are Indian dance techniques where all you do is perfect rasas for decades before you are ever allowed to perform. So when they go up on the stage, there is no words, there is no depiction. But if you're still, they go up on the stage and they will do facial expressions and finger gestures and mudras, and everybody in the audience, if they're intelligent about it, they will hear the story. It's like sign language, just by looking at the emotional depictions. So they have perfected that. Does music have influence on our psychology? Modern science says, absolutely. Music has influence on our psychology. For hundreds of years, classical Indian music has been studying exactly that. I have studied tabla. Tabla is a percussion instrument since I was about 6 years old. My father is a tabla player. My grandfather is a tabla player. And believe me when I say that when I studied playing these drums, these percussion instruments, I was reading compositions that were written hundreds of years ago. And it creates emotions. I can create emotion as a result of playing musical instruments. So that also has been done. So tell me what more you want to know today from a few folks. All they can do is collect blood samples, pulse, habits, ask you a few questions, which your answers will vary based on what side of the bed you woke up from, how long of a yoga you did, what happened at work, etc., etc. That laboratory has been perfected. Yeah? So my question deviates a little bit. So that was point number 3. My question deviates a little bit as to whether science should validate the benefits of yoga. My question deviates to the following. Why does science feel it is important to validate the results of yoga if it is already working? If it is not working for you, a scientific result is not going to make that work for you. If it is working for you, a scientific result, denying or declining that, is not going to make it not work for you. So why bother? Why bring up? To me, the question, in spite of being a scientist and a spiritual person, that question is invalid. I don't need proof if it is working for me. I don't need proof if it is not working for me. Because yoga, at the end of the day, is a very personal practice. What is inside of you, nobody can tell. Yes?